Well, first of all, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. As Soumya said, this is the last session of the day. So someone just told me you need to leave a good impression to all the people attending. So I will do my best. The topic for this session is execution brain. We will be focusing on replenishment planning. And then as part of this, who I am today for you, I'm going to be your replenishment planner, assuming that we are all working for a global fashion retail company, which means in my role, I'm gonna manage a very complex network. So you have to imagine something done like multiple layers on the distribution center, like central DCs, regional DCs, multiple channels, like it could be retail, wholesale, e-com. And finally, of course, like the store, our point of sales. Part of this complex network, what you have to imagine is we are gonna deal with hundreds of thousands of intersections, if not like millions. So the problem we are trying to solve here is pretty complex on paper, and we will try to make it a little bit simpler. Before we go into the demo, before I show you how you can run a proper replenishment plan, touchless replenishment plan on the online platform, I'm gonna summarize for you what we see on the market, what I see personally, what are most of the challenges that we see in different companies, in different industries, not only in retails. The fundamental issue is about like the concept of tribal knowledge and lack of intelligence. So what we see is that most of the time, especially in the short-term execution planning, the knowledge is mainly in the head of the planner. And the knowledge is also a little bit like tribal. So it's not like very well digitalized and shared across the organization. The second is about like the way of working, the approach, right? So we see that many planners tend to work by exceptions, but just, let's say, reacting to something which happens last minute, as well as, let's say, the approach is more like firefighting rather than foresee. And as a challenge number three, most of the time, many organizations are still using old legacy systems or like ERPs for managing the short-term execution. And in that context, they are only relying on static rules. And there is like a lack of AI-driven recommendation. So the decisions they're making are usually, let's say, not super smart, or at least, let's say, there is no AI support in making that. If this is the context, the plan for today is that it's gonna be different. Why? Because I'm gonna show you what is the art of the possible on the replenishment planning in the short-term execution. What we are going to see is, let's say, a future where, as a retail company, you can imagine how you can basically allow your planners to work like without using manual input, trying to make your plan completely touchless, and also how you can leverage the intelligence of the online fast response brain, the intelligence of the AI, to get the optimal balance between speed, analysis, and intelligence. So the ambition that we have, what we are going to show you on stage here is a completely touchless plan, which goes from distribution centers till the stores or any other point of sale. Now it's time to have fun. So let's see it in action. Let's jump to the platform, and then let's have a look at the system. Now, as part of this story, let me start saying it's Monday morning. As a replenishment planner, I'm sitting at my desk, and after having a nice coffee, possibly an espresso, not easy to find in Amsterdam, but anyway, I tried. I'm logging into the platform, and I'm opening the agent that we have created like for replenishment planning. And obviously, I mean, being Monday morning, my first question will be, I want to know how my replenishment plan looks like. So I'm gonna ask a simple question. Can you give me a short summary of my replenishment plan? So assuming the system, the solver has generated an output, instead of doing what I was used to do in the past, which is like looking at different dashboard reports and so on, I'm just asking a simple question to the agent, and I expect the agent will give me the summary that I need. Now, in this context, we have like different kind of information. Let's try to look at this and understand what the agent is telling us. First of all, on top, we see what our touchless planning percentage. So what the agent is telling us is that 95% of our stock transfer orders are auto-approved, which means that as a replenishment planner, if my role or my main responsibility is to take care of stock transfer order, I can say 95% are done. On top of that, there are like other measures, other KPI, like supportability. 92% is my fill rate at the moment. Not ideal. I want to get 100%. We will try to see later if we can get that. And we also have other measures, like we have potential loss, the amount of these lost sales, the potential sales revenue, and so on. If we focus then, let's say, on what is called key observation here, We can get also more information about the auto-approval transfer orders. So what the agent is telling us is that out of these 95% of stock orders auto-approved, 92 are going through standard lanes. So it's something we could expect. So basically, the order is just following the standard path, while 3% of these, almost 3%, are auto-approved, even though they are not going through standard lanes. Now, having said that, the first thing I want to mention is we are talking with the agent. We are trying to ask whatever we want to the agent, but doesn't mean that we cannot get the access to any kind of view, screen, report in the platform where we can get more information. Like, for example, if I want to see the source of this information, the agent is offering me the link where I can, let's say, look at the dashboard. And then in this dashboard, actually, you can see many more information about my replenishment plan. Let's take a look just at a couple of these. The first one here on top on the left is like the supportability chart, something that you have seen in like different contexts now. Here we will be focusing on the execution horizon, next 28 days in daily buckets. And what the supportability shows me is in which bucket I have like potential lost sales. So whatever you see here in red means that there is a potential lost sales happening in that specific bucket. Or another thing I could do is I could open, like, for example, the box we have in the middle, which is the detailed STO report, especially focusing on the manual orders here. And then here I can deep dive, for example, on what is under manual review at the maximum level of detail, which basically means source, destination, item, quantity. Here I can deep dive. I can even, let's say, look at more information. But if we go back to the agent, then my next follow-up question for the agent will be something about the manual STO. So I want to understand why we have got these 5% of orders under manual review. So then I can ask you, can you give me details of the manual STOs? And I expect that the agent will deep dive on the root cause of it and will give us, let's say, the explanation. And what we see here in the overview is that, look, out of more than 400 orders, you have got 22 under manual review. And out of these 22, we have got 11 under manual review because those are not respecting the threshold in terms of quantity. A couple of them are not respecting the threshold in terms of quantity and value. And there are 9 of them which are basically supposed to go alternate sourcing. But since we are talking about low margin classy item, we don't want to enable any alternate sourcing for them. There are like few other things the agent is telling me. One interesting one is the cost benefit analysis. So the agent is telling me if I decide to approve all of them in one shot, I'm going to have an extra cost in terms of transportation, which is about 1.3 thousand. And in that way, I can avoid potentially lost sales for 4.2 thousand US dollars. Now, the question you might have, the question I personally have here is, how do we define the rules to decide whether something needs to be auto-approved or, let's say, it should be under manual review? Well, the agent is smart and is suggesting us like the link to the control panel. Then if we open that link, you can see the control panel screen is really the place where the planner, the users can adjust all the rules behind the logic used by the solver. For example, here on top, we see the approval policy. And then we see that for all the item segment C, which is about like low margin item, the alternate sourcing and the expedite input are not enabled, which means that the solver can still try, let's say, to find if there is any alternate sourcing, but we don't want to approve by default these orders because they might have an extra cost, and I want to evaluate as a planner if it makes sense or not to pay for it. The manual, let's say, STOs was, let's say, one of the topics that we want to focus on. As we see, the percentage of touchless planning is pretty high. But when you have seen the summary, when we all, let's say, were looking at the summary, if you remember, there was an interesting part which was about like the potential of sales. Now, instead of scrolling up and then ask to the agent like to move back, I can just ask like, can you bring me back to the summary? And then it gives me again the same summary I've got at the beginning. And now it's time to focus on the part that we have in the bottom of this summary, which is about like the potential of sales. Because on one side, I have to approve all the orders, I have to manage the STOs and so on. On the other side, my second task as a replenishment planner will be to try to improve as much as possible my fill rate and avoid as much as possible lost sales. Now, what the agent is telling me is what's the product category impacted by the lost sales. It's telling me what's the lost units, so the potential lost sales I have in volume, which is about like 500 units. What is the lost revenue, which in this case is about like 33,000. And also what's the impacted region, assuming that we have more than one region. In this case, is the East region. Now, The summary I've got here is very high level. Now, working in retail, I might be interested in understanding more about what's going on at store level, or anyway, I mean, to deep dive to a more granular level of detail. And instead of jumping to a view or a report as we have done before, I can just ask to the agent to show me the data, the output at the level of detail I want. So I'm going to ask to the agent, show me the store level supportability view. So show me basically an additional level of detail, because I want to understand more what is the impact of the lost sales at store level. So then in that way, the agent will deep dive at the level I'm asking here, which is the store level, and will give us like more details on how the supportability looks like at store level. And then if you focus on the table, right, that we have here in the middle, what you can see is that all the shortages are happening on the East region. That's something we knew. And then there are also all the stores where these shortages happening, potentially. While on the central region, we see that our supportability is always 100%. So there are no issues there. All right, so now at this point in time, what we know all is that there is a problem. Our fill rate is not what we want. We have like potential lost sales. My simple question, the question I have for the agent is, well, is there any way to improve my fill rate? Is there any way to avoid like potential lost sales? So show me the options, if there is any. And instead of like running manually like scenarios, trying like different options and so on, I can just like leave the agent to do it for me. And then in the back end, the agent can, let's say, see, learning from the past, what are like the options in this specific case. It gives me a couple of resolution paths. So for this specific problem, through the intelligence of the agent, I'm getting like two options. The option number one is enable a DC transfer. So basically looking at my supply on all the different regions, all the different DCs, I could potentially move some stock from the central DC to the East DC. And in this way, my supportability will go up to 96% with an extra cost I have to pay and with a margin which is about like 60%. Option number two is reallocate inventory. By the way, it's the recommended options from the agent. And this is about like moving some supply from the wholesale channel to the retail channel. So within the same region, I'm just thinking about like moving supply from one channel to another. In this case, I see my supportability goes up to 99%, and my margin is, let's say, about like 62%. One more thing here, right? So the moment that we decide to reallocate supply between channels, one of the things we need to be aware of is that there might be an impact on the wholesale inventory. And I might be interested in understanding more about that, especially if I'm responsible for both channels, or even if I'm not responsible for both. I need for sure to inform, let's say, whoever is responsible for wholesale, that if I decide to go for that path, there will be an impact. The agent is already telling me here under wholesale inventory impact that most likely my inventory on the wholesale channel will drop from 10 days to 4 days. And if I click on the link suggested by the agent, I can deep dive on the inventory plan report and easily, let's say, understand the reason why I'm getting these. If you look at the first week of the horizon you see here on screen, the green line and the blue line are not matching. Now, the green line is representing our target inventory, while the blue line is representing our ending on end. And as you see here in the first week, if we decide to reallocate supply, it means that our inventory level on the wholesale channel will not respect my inventory target. It's something which is also visible in the table below, right? So where you see that in the first week, going from the 13th of May till the 19th of May, there is an alert under inventory status saying that we are under stock, which is not stock out. So it might be fine. I might be okay with that. I can take the risk to fulfill more demand on the retail channel and then take some supply from the wholesale channel. But I mean, when we look at this screen or any other screen from the UI, it could be the dashboard, it could be the control panel we have seen before, it could be the inventory plan. You might probably have the question about, can I ask something to the agent wherever I am in the UI, or do I need to go to the agent page all the time? Well, obviously the answer is that you can ask things to the agent directly from any kind of screen in the UI. And you can open, for example, the digital assistant directly here from this screen. And let's assume you want to get a summary of these. So instead of doing what I've just done, looking at the graph, looking at the measure, and then try to build my summary, I can just ask to the agent, can you build a summary for me? And then you see that the agent, like in a few seconds, will give us a summary, and then the summary will give us all the highlights about that. So it will start saying your inventory level will drop from 10 days to 4 days, and then many other things. Just let's think about the value of having something like this when someone comes to you and say, okay, look, can you give me a summary on what's going to be the impact if we do this? And instead of like building your analysis, which is taking maybe minutes, if not hours, you can just ask to the agent and it will give you the summary like in a few seconds. And then you can share with whoever you want. All right, so now we're reaching out the end of the flow where basically it's fine. I can accept to take the risk to reallocate supply from one channel to another. So if we go back to the agent page, it's time to complete the flow. And as part of this flow, I just want to ask to the agent, all right, can you promote the wholesale reallocation scenario as a new plan of record? So basically make it the new plan of record, the one I want to use, let's say, for my execution. And then after you have done that, the system will tell you, okay, look, this is done. This is becoming new plan of record. There is a certain impact there. And you need to make sure that you can, let's say, monitor whatever you have decided here through the execution. I just want to wrap up saying a couple of things. The first is about today, I think you have seen many demos. In most of them, you have seen, let's say, how you can work with the agent, how you can jump from the agent page to the UI. So how, let's say, the entire experience for planners will change. The ambition that we have with this is really to, let's say, make sure that the planner's role evolve. This is not just about like saving time. This is like an option to give back time to the planners to make an impact on what really matters, on where they can, let's say, bring most of the value. And the other important thing to know is that, I mean, probably you know AI is a big topic. We want to make sure that you understand out of these sessions that AI is not really the future, but the future is already here. So I hope you like the session. Thanks again for coming, and I wish you a nice rest of your day.